Chapter 3. Where Could She Be? One Saturday, Annabelle sat at the table in the doll's kitchen, gazing ahead of her. Kate and Rachel were sprawled on Kate's bed, discussing the clues to a Nancy Drew mystery. Annabelle wasn't listening to them. Her eyes were fixed on a large brown spider inching its way into the kitchen. Annabelle wanted to scream and run from the room. The spider was nearly as big as her head, and it was making its way toward Annabelle's chair. The spider couldn't bite Annabelle, of course, since she was made of china, but more than once a spider had crawled across Annabelle, and she had to sit still as the hairy legs crept over her arms, her face. Please, please go in some other direction, Annabelle silently prayed. As the spider continued its journey toward her, she thought of Auntie Sarah and her drawings of spiders. Perhaps Auntie Sarah had liked spiders and insects. Annabelle hadn't been able to spend much time with the journal lately. She desperately wanted to read more of it, but only if she could do so privately. The spider took 2 more steps toward Annabelle. Annabelle tried not to look at it. She imagined Auntie Sarah sitting in the dollhouse studying spiders although she couldn't remember this actually happening. In fact, spiders and insects only occasionally crept into the house. Annabelle frowned. Something was wrong with the picture in her head. Just 2 inches from Annabelle, the spider turned and began making its way toward a window. Annabelle barely noticed. She couldn't stop thinking about Auntie Sarah and where exactly she had made her drawings. That evening, Kate closed the front of the house firmly. Annabelle was thrilled. She knew exactly what she wanted to do with her free time that night. That evening, Kate closed the front of the house firmly. Annabelle was thrilled. She knew exactly what she wanted to do with her free time that night, and as soon as she was able, she told her family she wanted some privacy and settled on her bed in the nursery with Auntie Sarah's journal. This time, Annabelle began to read it from the very beginning instead of skipping around, and she was able to read nearly 20 pages before Papa called, "Laces, everyone!" The first few pages on which Auntie Sarah recorded details of her everyday life in the dollhouse were not of much interest, since the dolls' lives then were nearly like they were today. Then Annabelle found an entry that began, "The time has come for another adventure. Tomorrow I set out for the living room. I plan to blend somewhere near the radio." Annabelle paused. There was no radio in the parlor of the doll's house. There never had been. And blend? What did that mean? Annabelle had heard the word before, of course, but never used it in quite that way. Puzzled, she read on. A page later, Auntie Sarah wrote, "Hard to believe. I am writing this sitting on the table in living room. Catherine and her husband were just here. We're talking about baby they are going to have. Now I'm listening to news. Huge storm expected tomorrow. Hurricane Connie. Very exciting." Annabelle stopped reading again. Catherine and her husband were where? In Catherine's old bedroom? That didn't sound right to Annabelle, since Catherine had moved to a bedroom down the hall when she'd gotten married. Still, maybe they were talking about redecorating the room for the baby who would be born soon, for Annie? But where was the radio? Hurricane Connie, the news. Something stirred in Annabelle's mind. Excitement, names Annabelle hadn't thought of in decades. Amelia Earhart, Eleanor Roosevelt. Auntie Sarah used to tell Annabelle about events in the news, and especially about women she admired. But how had she known about them? Had Auntie Sarah left the dollhouse? Was it possible she was talking about the living room of the human's house? She had, after all, written living room, not parlor. Annabelle let the journal slip from her hands and fall to the bed. This was nearly unthinkable. The dolls never left their house, not on their own. Occasionally, they had been carried out of the house, most recently by Kate and Nora, but they had never left it on their own. It sat on a shelf several feet above the floor. Even if a doll could leave the house, could she run across the floor unseen? Annabelle thought about permanent doll state. Perhaps this was the sort of risk that would lead to permanent doll state. The sort of risk grown-ups had in mind, but never spoke of. Annabelle's hands were trembling as she picked up the journal again. The spiders. Had Auntie Sarah left the house to study them? Had she sneaked out into the world of the humans and somehow blended in with them? Had she managed, unseen, to overhear their conversations, to listen to their news on the radio? Maybe, just maybe, she had even read some of their books. It would have been a struggle to open them, but Annabelle had a feeling that Auntie Sarah might have been able to do it, to do all these things. She didn't know how Auntie Sarah had gone in and out of the dollhouse without Annabelle's seeing her. That was a mystery she would have to solve. But if what Annabelle was thinking were true, then perhaps Auntie Sarah wasn't missing after all. Perhaps she was somewhere in the Palmer's house. The next morning, the moment Kate's house had emptied, Annabelle said, "Mama, why don't we ever leave our house?" "Leave our house?" Mama repeated. "Why, Annabelle, you know the answer to that." "I know you say it's because it isn't safe," Annabelle began. "It most certainly is not," said Nanny. "How would you leave the house anyway, Annabelle?" Annabelle, who was sitting on the floor of the parlor with her legs dangling over the edge, looked below her. It was a long way down. The shelf on which the dollhouses sat was in the corner of Kate's room. Just below it, the wooden stool, it was 4 steps high, painted white with pink roses. The top step was just 2 inches under the shelf. Kate used the stool to reach the rooms on the top floor of the house, although she no longer needed it for the rooms on the first floor. Sometimes she slid the stool under the shelf, but it was out now, and Annabelle studied it. "I bet I could get down the steps of the stool," she said, leaning over. "Oh, Annabelle," said Mama, "how would you get back up the steps? Each one is higher than you, and if you fell, you'd land on hard floor." "You'd crack your head open," added Bobby. "I just think I could do it. How did Auntie Sarah leave the house?" asked Annabelle. For a moment, no one spoke. Annabelle looked intently at her parents. "Annabelle," said Papa at last, "leaving the house is dangerous. The captain—" "You didn't answer my question," Annabelle persisted. "How did Auntie Sarah leave? I know she left." "Oh, that was so long ago," said Mama. "Yes, she did used to leave, but I have an idea. How about having a sing-along right now? It's a bit risky, but I think we can get away with it." "What do you mean, Auntie Sarah used to leave the house?" interrupted Bobby. "She did," said Annabelle, "all by herself." "Is that true?" Bobby turned to Mama and Papa. "She really did?" Mama and Papa glanced at each other, then at Uncle Doll, and Uncle Doll, to Annabelle's surprise, glared back at them. "Why?" said Bobby. "Why'd she do that? I mean, what did she do while she was out of the house? Where'd she go? And, Annabelle, how do you know she used to do that?" Everyone now turned to Annabelle. Silence. "Well, what about that sing-along?" said Mama brightly. "We can start off with respect," added Papa. "No," said Annabelle. "I want to know something. Didn't anybody ever look for Auntie Sarah after she disappeared?" "Why, of course, Annabelle. We searched the house from top to bottom," replied Papa. "But didn't you look for her outside of the house? Out there?" Annabelle gestured to Kate's room and to the hallway beyond. "Well, as we've said, that would have been very dangerous," said Papa. Uncle Doll turned his head away. "But it was Auntie Sarah," said Annabelle, glancing curiously at her uncle. "If I were missing, wouldn't you look for me?" "Goodness, Annabelle, I don't think you're going to go missing," said Nanny. "I could. Something could happen to me, and I could disappear and be in great danger. The captain could climb up the stool and run off with me, or Nora could take me and lose me somewhere, and I would hope you would look for me." "But, Annabelle," said Nanny, "you know full well that would put us in danger. We would wind up in doll state or permanent doll state." "But after I was missing for so long, wouldn't you look for me? Mama? Papa? Wouldn't you?" Mama and Papa looked at each other, then at Nanny. Uncle Doll glared at all 3 of them. No one said a word. "How about respect?" suggested Bobby in a small voice. Still, no one said a word. That night, long after Kate had gone to sleep, and Mama had said it was all right to move about the house, Annabelle lay on her bed, refusing to speak to anyone. Her family left her alone, and she pulled Auntie Sarah's journal out from under her covers. Annabelle skipped ahead a few pages and read that Auntie Sarah was planning a nature study exploration. She squinted down at the fine pen marks on the page, frustrated at having to read such exciting words by Kate's nightlight only. I need to develop a greater understanding of creatures in this house, Auntie Sarah had written, and Annabelle realized she meant the human's house, not the doll's house. Annabelle thought about this for a while. Then she snapped the journal shut, slid it under the covers, and marched out of the nursery and down the stairs to the parlor. There, she found the rest of her family. The adults and Bobby were talking quietly, while baby Betsy sat leaning against the piano, playing with a stuffed bunny. Annabelle stood still and looked at everybody, her hands on her hips. After a moment, she said, I have an announcement to make. I am going to search for Auntie Sarah. Everyone began talking at once. Oh, no, said Mama. Annabelle, you can't, said Nanny. Right now? Asked Uncle Doll. That isn't safe, said Papa. Annabelle thought about brave Auntie Sarah. She thought about Amelia Earhart and Eleanor Roosevelt and Nancy Drew. I'm going anyway, she said. The rest of the dolls sat in stunned silence. At last, Uncle Doll rose to his feet. Well, Annabelle, if you are going to go no matter what, he said slowly, then I am going with you.